What's going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back with another episode of the Ravens Roundtable here on Two Guys Watching Football. I'm joined by a couple of buddies of mine. I got Dev Panchwag from Russell Street Report. Dev, what's going on, my guy?
Can't be any better than talking offensive line with you, my friend.
There we go. I finally got my dream. Let's go. We're here to talk about Morgan Moses signing a 3-year, $15 million deal. And of course, I can't do it. I can't talk about the cap without my cap guru. We got Dan Reese at DP Reese 8 joining us live from Starbucks on the West Coast. How's it going, Dan?
Hey, it's going great. How crazy! Another signing right after our show last night. So awesome to talk about another one. So let's do it.
Absolutely. So for those of you that didn't see it, we did a video last night. I'll drop it down in the comment or in the description below, looking at the Marcus Williams signing, looking at where they could go. We did it with James Ogden, and I think the forward direction that we all kind of came away with was we got to hit on the offensive line. And then sure enough, at 10 o'clock or so, set a scene for you. I'm sitting here playing Warzone like the man-child I am at 29 years old. I look to the left over at my monitor and my notifications blow up, and there it is, the signing of Morgan Moses, who's going to come in and be that immediate plug and play at right tackle. So I think we'll start here. We're going to kind of go through a few things. We're going to talk about the cap because the contract was really interesting. We're going to take a look at a little bit of what you can expect from Morgan Moses, what he's going to bring the Ravens. That's why I got Dev here. We'll kind of talk through that. And then we're all going to talk about a little bit of, okay, now what? And what can they do with that cap picture? So we got the notorious slides. I know you guys have been complimenting these because it lays it all out. You can screenshot them. So we'll get right into those with Dan, have Dan walk us through that. 34 people in here. Appreciate everyone being here. Go ahead, hit that like button, hit subscribe so you can find your way back for more. So Dan, looking at the contract here. So it is a 3-year, $15 million deal. Kind of walk us through, how does this contract look to you?
Yeah, so kind of a really nice signing and structure for the Ravens. The base salary for year one, sorry for all the background noise, everybody, but I'll do my best. Base salary is just over 1.1 million. The prorated bonus, signing bonus was about 4.4 million. That's spread over the 3 years, the length of the contract. So that ends up with a cap number around 2.5 million. After year one, the base salary jumps to 4 million and then 5.5 million. So, a little bit more aggressive for years 2 and 3, kind of depending on how he's doing. But the great thing about this contract is that it's really low risk. So, you go into year one, and it's 5.5 million or whatever of cost for year one. And if it doesn't pan out, you can go ahead and cut him. And it kind of just there's no cost after that. I say 5.5 because that's the cash that leaves after year one. It would be a 2.5 million cap hit on the first year, and then depending on the timing of the cut, either a 3 million in year 2 or 1.5 year 2 and year 3. But really minimal cap hit if they move on after year one.
Yeah, and that was kind of my big takeaway. Something I wanted to check with Dev. Dev, how do you kind of feel about this? Because I see, the low risk really stands out. Like, he's going to be here this year. Even if things went sideways, next year doesn't really leave you in too bad of a situation. And as he gets into 2024 at 33 years old, you're in a great situation where you're either having him at a reasonable price, a nicely paid right tackle, or if you have to move on, the cap savings are there. So how did you view that?
Yeah, Dan and I, we've talked about these glorified 1 or 2 year deals. I mean, this looks like that kind of structure. You hit it on the head. I mean, what can you lose here? I mean, even if they had to cut him, they're incurring no debt, really virtually no dead money. I can't believe he signed this deal. I was going to ask you guys, like, what are the motivations? And I was thinking about it before. I'm like, well, he's from the area. He's also played with some bad football teams. And he's at a point in his career, he might have just said, all right, I want to play with a good team and I'm close to the area and I can work with this money in the structure. But yeah, this is a home run. Also the cap percentages too, because they're going to be in better shape, you would think. I mean, they're in pretty good shape this year comparative to other, like last year, right? So it's just, everything here looks phenomenal. There's nothing to lose, and he's been durable and he's played. So you would think they're going to maximize the contract, if anything.
That's the big thing for me is I'm not concerned about him in terms of an injury situation. I mean, they can happen at any point. Don't get me wrong, but they're getting a durable right tackle, and he's one of those guys that as long as he's loving it, he's enjoying playing football. You can see him playing into his mid-30s. There's no reason to really doubt that. I kind of dug in, sniffed around what kind of the motivations were. And I think the biggest thing I learned is his priority was being in this area. He spent six years, I think, in Washington, went to the University of Virginia. So, I mean, he's been in this area the whole time. So I think the Ravens really had that going for them. And then I think another motivation to him might have been getting that third year versus, other teams maybe offering him 1 or 2 years. So, it's interesting, too, to kind of move on and see where this stacks up against other right tackles. He's, I think he's around 16th. And, you're getting, he's not going to be a top 10, top 5 type player for you. He's going to be a nice, reliable mid-level right tackle, but they got that at a mid-level price. And so that's really what was important to me. And then I'll turn it back over to Dan here because, now that we have 2 signings in, we can confirm the details of Morgan Moses. We're still estimating here on Marcus Williams what his contract would look like based on the details we have. Once we know more, we'll update that, make it official. But Dan, how does this make our effective cap look right now?
Yeah, just like you said, Marcus Williams, the $6 million is an estimate based off of, kind of similar structure with a minimum first year and then a reasonable signing of a signing bonus and spreading that across the 5 years. All things being said, this reflects those 2 signing plus also the rookie class coming in and the additional cost of them, offset by the adjustment for the rule of 51, where only the top 51 contracts hit the cap right now. And after that all said and done, got about $5 million or so, $4.7 million in cap remaining. So not a ton, but as we'll talk about, there are some. The Ravens really haven't hit any of the switches to gain more cap other than a couple early cuts. So,
yeah. So right now they're basically sitting at right around, we're about $1 million off what they normally carry into the season. But like you said, we have things that are at the disposal of Eric DaCosta that he can do. We've looked at this slide about 500 times now, so I won't belabor the point. But essentially, what we're looking at here is they can create between, and they can go as high or as low as they want, but they can create, I will say 13 because I think we all see Marlon and Ronnie getting restructured. So between 13 and $17 million in effective cap space just through restructuring. And that doesn't count the cuts that could possibly be made, a couple of extension options in Lamar Jackson and Marcus Peters. So I think this is the big point for me is they're currently in a good spot. They filled 2 big holes. They got a right tackle that they can trust to start week 1. They got a free safety that's going to be a playmaker ball hawk on the back end. And they have what they need to carry into the season, counting their draft picks. So in terms of where they're at cap-wise, they're in great shape. And, as we've seen from the structure, they're willing to kind of do a little bit of backloading to get that year 1 cap hit down. So they pull a couple of these triggers and they immediately have room to sign someone else. And that's exactly what we'll see here. So Dan, walk us through this because I think this is just, if they do restructure Ronnie and Marlon, which I think we're expecting, this is what our effective cap. So walk us through this.
Yeah, these are just the 2 restructures added to that. So that increases the cap remaining to about 18.2 million, which is fantastic. With just two moves that aren't incurring much additional risk, they can jump to 18 million. And you can just see by the cap hits above for Williams and Moses, you can make big signings for reasonable first year hits. So that 18 can go a long way. So I could easily see them making 1 or 2 decent size signings, and possibly some smaller ones to kind of fill in the gaps. So I don't think they're done yet, and a great start. And I think with some restructures, they can gain some more flexibility and make a couple more moves.
Absolutely. And so let's get into Morgan Moses, the player, and what he brings. So what I did, what I always do is I reach out to kind of the film people that I know that are watching these guys, and I reached out to Mark Bullock from the Athletic, who covers the Washington Commanders, because he saw him for years. He saw him for years down there in Washington. And he said I didn't see him last year because he was with the Jets, but I just kind of said, what can you tell me about him? And I'll just kind of read you guys what he told me. So he said, huge frame with a really solid punch and pass protection, can struggle with bendy rushers that can get low while turning the corner, struggled with some waist bending coming out of college, but improved that significantly under Bill Callahan. Developed into a really good right tackle when he got his big contract. Couple down years, but bounced back really well. And his last year with Washington, he called his best year. And so that was he ended up on it with the Jets for a year, and now here he said he finished with incredibly tough player, fights through banged up injuries. That's why his durability is so high. And he said one thing that's really interesting, and this is something I noticed. So I watched 2 games of him this morning. Again, well, I probably should be working. Hopefully my boss isn't watching. I'm going to get fired this week, I think. That's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, this is classic. This is the classic, it's like March Madness is not as bad for productivity for me, at least, as free agency is.
The worst part is my boss follows me on Twitter, so he might be seeing this live right now. So Rob, if you're seeing this, avert your eyes. He said, and one thing that stood out, he said somehow he always gets away with false starts. And so when he said that, it was something I noticed. And I think this is something Morgan Moses has really learned to do, and that's time of snap count. And what's really important with that is some of the limitations he talked about. Taller, less bendy, stiffer guy. They need those advantages. They need to increase that margin of error. And so one of the ways he does that is through really good timing of the snap count. For those of you that joined me for the Brock Hoffman film room, Brock talked about when he got moved to right tackle in the West Virginia game, his most important thing and what his coach told him was just get out of your stance. And that's so important at tackle. And so seeing him adjust to that earlier in his career and then continue with it gives me a lot of hope as we move down the road, as he gets older. He's going to lose a step, but he's playing very nuanced football. So Dev, what can you tell me? What do you expect from Morgan Moses? How do you feel about him as a player?
Yeah, you covered a lot of good ground. Bill Callahan, that stood out to me. I know you with you being so in the trenches with the technique side, but that's a good guy to learn from. So you would probably think he picked up those traits that, again, help him overcome the shortcomings physically. And another thing that when you were describing him, and I put this out there a couple of weeks ago with the veterans, and the Ravens like these veteran tackles. If you look at their history too, like you look at Willie Anderson, it kind of sounds a lot like him, right? Like a guy that's big, strong, has that power, maybe not tremendous, he's not tremendously quick or athletic necessarily. That's not his game, but he understands how, from a technique perspective, to gain an advantage, he understands the snap count. Those are like little nuances that a smart player like that that's why he's playing for as long as he's playing at a high level. So that's when you said this is his best year, or scored in Washington as his best year going to the Jets. And I think he played very well with the Jets as well. So that is, I think that, again, kind of aligns with Anderson and some of these older guys that the Ravens have gotten in the years and have played well for them into their 30s. So that is all, I think when you think about reliability, that's a huge key, because he's going to lose some tread, but it's not going to make a big difference in the long run because he knows how to play the position. And he's tough, and he battles. And I loved his quote he had regarding playing through things and being there for his team. So that all defines, to me, that's like a classic Raven. And also that you could see why they were attracted to him in the first place.
Absolutely. No, that's really well said. And so, a couple questions out there that I'm kind of anticipating. One of the big questions is, okay, can he swing? Can he play left tackle? So, through his career, he's played 6,893 right tackle snaps and 279 left tackle snaps. So in 2020, he filled in at 2.5 games at left tackle. So I think he's the kind of guy that, and actually he performed quite well when he was in there at left tackle, which was really interesting to me, just because he hadn't done it since 2014. And then he got moved in the middle of a game, and then they left him there for 2 full games, and he did it well. So, I don't think this is, if Ronnie Stanley can't get right by week 1, I'm not sure moving Morgan Moses over there is going to be their answer. So I don't see him in that way. But he does bring you a little bit of versatility in that sense. Like once we start getting down to plan C, plan D, I think last year we were on plan E. For God's sakes, I was almost out there at left tackle. So I think you definitely get a little bit of an option there, but it still leaves that kind of, okay, we're in the middle of summer. What do we do at left tackle? Ronnie Stanley's still not back. So, yeah, Dev, how would you kind of fill that void? Are you looking for another swing tackle type guy, a Cornelius Lucas, or are you looking for a drafted guy? How would you try and approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you go with the draft, there's a huge mystery there too, right? Can somebody come in immediately day one and provide value at left tackle? I would still explore the veteran route. I guess I'd explore the free agency route if I could, and see if you can bring in a solid backup at left tackle. That's my first preference, honestly, because I think Bakari, and you've confirmed this, he can play. I mean, he can play left tackle in a pinch as well. So it'd be interesting to see if he's like number one on the depth chart at left tackle behind Stanley right now, and if they have two right tackles in theory with Moses and James, all of a sudden that kind of gets opened up as well, that Makari could focus on left tackle. Maybe, he's still in play at center too, but that makes me less nervous knowing that Moses can play left tackle if you have to do that. I'm not saying, and like you said, that's not number one option, but it's better than E, which they were at before. Were we looking at Andre Smith at left tackle at one point? So and you've pointed this out. The draft has a lot of talented guys. I would still, you've got 5 4th-round picks, 2 3rd-round picks. Take one and hope for the best in terms of that development being in place quickly. So I would still do that, and I would probably still sign a cheaper left tackle backup if you can do that. Dan, I mean, with some of those things that you've projected, it's just a matter of prioritization at that point, right? So if you can get something,
yeah, I think they do have the room. I just I'm not sure that they have the roster spots. That's what that gets concerns me, I guess.
So that's something I wanted to ask you about, Dan, because the idea I floated last night is you have a Cornelius Lucas, again, a name I'm going to keep pumping, get used to it, that has played left tackle for extended periods of time. Is it, what do you think? Does it make sense cap wise to maybe they go the direction of letting Juwan James go because they've kind of filled that right tackle void, and then bringing in a swing and filling that roster spot with like a Lucas? How would that look?
I don't know what his money is looking like, but they could do that. They could move on from James. They could also probably figure out a way to keep them both through the preseason and then see how it shakes out. Don't want to be looking to cut someone and then looking later. So they could probably figure out a way to keep both until they need a final decision. It just is at this point, it's just opportunity cost, right? You've got so much money and a couple of places where you can improve, and it's just whether you think the draft or the backups you have are good enough plan B and C or whatever, or if you need to look. But there are a lot of offensive tackles out there, as we saw. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're really patient and just kind of see what sticks and see who's there in a couple weeks, maybe even after. I forget when the deadline is, but after the point where it doesn't count against your comp anymore. Even though the comp pick is probably over with after these 2 signings, but you never know. So I wouldn't be surprised if they delay and kind of wait and see what's out there, and then grab someone late for a vet min or something like that. But we'll see. But actually, Cole, I just want to say I got to jump.
No worries.
Got to actually head out and do work. But I'm glad I could talk a little bit about cap, and I can't wait to listen to the rest of this. And if anyone has any questions, just hit me up on Twitter, and happy to talk cap. So
at DPReese8 on Twitter, go follow Dan. With Brian and Dan, the Ravens flock is really well covered with salary cap knowledge. So Dan, thanks so much for joining us, and safe travels on your way home from Starbucks.
See you guys.
So for those of you guys joining us again, we got 63 people down there in the chat. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you guys are new here. I'm joined by Dev Panchwag from Russell Street Report. We're talking Morgan Moses. So that's kind of, Dan kind of summed it up. I think if you go look at the savings before March 22nd, they can cut Juwan James and save $3 million on the cap. PFF's projecting a Cornelius Lucas contract at 2 years, $5 million, $2.5 million a year. That is tempting to me. Like, is that silly? Like, is it silly to bring James in, put him through this? What do you think?
No, what's interesting? He brought up a really good point as far as, you brought up the point, but the idea being if you did cut James because you feel like Macari and Moses is totally fine at right tackle. So now all of a sudden, flip what I just said before, Macari at left tackle, now Macari at right tackle. And then you put, like you said, the money towards Lucas. And I don't think that's crazy money. That's really like that's perfectly fine. And the other thing that Dan brought up that got me thinking is there's so many veterans that are out there, and those first year cap hits are going to be, I mean, you're going to be able to manage that, right? Because there's not only so much money, so much cap space to go around right now. So the Ravens are playing this the right way. They're playing the long game. It's funny because they got called out for being patient day one, but as this continues to move forward, their patience can really be paid off. So yeah, I'm with it. I would, if you can make that work and you can still hit on, I don't know, a couple of other, we'll get into that, but a couple other veterans, unrestricted signings, cuts, trades, whatever, and you can keep a couple of your own players. I think they can still do that with that cap space.
Yeah, no, well said. And my guy Jim 20 Eyes down here in the comments made a really good point. I'll just read it for those listening on a podcast format. It's not just a Stanley backup to start the season, even if he's okay to start the season. How long can he keep it up? Maybe he plays 6, 8, 10 games and his ankle gives out. And that's like, so I get a concern from a rookie backup left tackle because we're probably not taking a rookie at 14 anymore. 45 even becomes a little bit more unlikely. I could see definitely a rookie left tackle at like 76, 100, that range. Do you want a rookie third round pick starting day one at left tackle for you? I mean,
tough sell.
That's a tough sell. So, I mean, that's just where I just wish James could play left tackle. He did it in his rookie year, 2014, I think was his rookie year. I think him and Moses were same draft class. He started at right tackle, started the year their left tackle went down. He flipped over, hasn't really done it since. So it's kind of similar to Morgan Moses where they haven't done it a lot. I don't really want to bank on it. There's nothing really suggesting to me they can't do it, but I would think if they go into the season with this group and Stanley can't start, if you guys remember preseason last year when Stanley wasn't playing preseason games, the first string left tackle was actually Patrick Macari because they were letting AV rep at right tackle. They ended up obviously flipping them after week one, but that might be kind of their plan B as things stand in terms of so I don't know. Like I've kind of pigeonholed myself to one name. I'll keep repeating it, but I just think he makes so much sense because he can also play right tackle. So if you did end up in a nightmare scenario and somehow Stanley's your last guy, be kind of like Tavon Young last year, where your oft injured guy is your last man standing at tackle. He can play both sides, and so that's what really intrigues me so much about that option. So we'll kind of move on from that. I think we both see Morgan Moses. This is an upgrade. I mean, this is a great signing. The Ravens did a fantastic job with this. They got a durable, I use the word steady. I can't think he's the kind of guy he's going to give up 35, 40 pressures a year with about 5, 6 sacks. You can live with that. And what that gives Lamar Jackson, which is the most important part, he's going to get up to the line of scrimmage, look to his right side. He's going to see Morgan Moses and Kevin Zeitler. And I would feel safe. So
that's shaping up as one of the better right sides in the league right now, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a great point. And then also right tackle was also unreliable because you had Macari go down. And then when that happened, you had Phillips go in, he was in and out of the lineup. It's just been a mess from every angle. So just even having someone who doesn't miss games, knock on wood. But, I do like Dan's thought, though, if with these guys being older, James is coming off the injury, but if you can tag team that a bit, I like that as well. But no, you're right. This is a big upgrade. and it's a peace of mind. And Eric DaCosta pretty much put it out there that this was going to happen in his press conference.
That's what I said this morning. He typically does tell you kind of what he's thinking. Last year, he kept harping on offensive guard, and they signed Zeitler and they drafted Ben Cleveland. He was telling you exactly what he was going to do. He did lie about the wide receiver room. They did draft Rashad Bateman, despite saying they were okay with it. But kind of what I wanted to pick your brain on is, okay, we've seen now we can create up to $18 million in effective cap space. $5 million of that they're going to carry into the year. They have $13 million at a minimum, I would say, because I do think those restructures happen. Where do you go from here? Where are you targeting? Whether it's guys, positions, what's your path forward for the Ravens?
There's so many paths, and I told you before I hopped on, I made a list, and there's at least 20 people. I'm not going to go through all the names, but it's like our friend Mike Crawford says, there's ice cream flavors, right? There's flavors for anything you want. If they want to replace Brandon Williams, they have Eddie Goldman coming in for a visit. We saw Matt Ioannidis released just before we got on, and that name intrigues me because I don't know where they're at with Calais Campbell right now, but Ioannidis at 28, he didn't have the last 2 seasons. It's been filled with injuries. I think he's tore his biceps and some COVID stuff. But before that, he had 7.5 and 8.5 sacks as an interior pass rusher. So he basically comes in, gives you that Campbell-like interior pass rush, which is very attractive for me. As you know, Cole, I want them to, just like you want offensive line, I want pass rush. I want them to be able to get after the quarterback, and that's attractive. I think Michael Pierce is interesting too, because again, he's got like Zadarius Smith, right? He's connected to the Ravens, and you'll get him for much cheaper. So he's a guy that I would also be looking at. I think maybe that's where you start. At least I would start there. I think the centers, of course, is also a good place too with Treader and Bozeman. And then I would probably throw in, Zadarius Smith is in linked to the team, but I believe really comes down to cost. And the way I was weighing it a little bit more this morning. And yeah, this draft class being as strong as it is, if they don't get him or they don't get one of these veteran edge players, it won't be the end of the world. There's a lot of good depth at edge, assuming you check off like 2 more needs. I think that's fine because you can load up in the draft. So that's where I'm at. And I also, it wouldn't be something if they somehow were able to also bring back AA after all this. Like we thought he was priced out, and you can bring him back as your 4th corner or 3rd corner. They don't really have 3rd corner defined yet. So
yeah, it's funny because we talked about that last night. Look at Levi Wallace's deal. So he signed a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Bears.
Oh, was it the Steelers or the Bears?
Oh, no, it was the Steelers. Yeah,
Steelers, right?
Those guys.
Yeah, they're making those too.
So that's interesting. So I think obviously Levi Wallace he was a starter all of last year, so he's probably in a higher tier to Anthony Averett, and he got $4 million AAV. I was originally saying you could go out and get Anthony Averett. Too many A's in there. I go out and get AA for 2. I kept saying 2 years, $8 million, and give him a $3 and $5 mil cap hit, and you can live with that. He gives you that depth because you have so much uncertainty at outside corner. Now I'm thinking 1 year, $2.5 million.
Yeah.
Would he bite that? Maybe 1 year, $2 million with some incentives. Playtime incentives. So I think that became more feasible just because similar to the edge market and how it's moving slow right now, the corner market's moving slow. And the reason why is because edge and corner are really deep in this year's draft. So why spend your load on and that's what made the Marcus Williams signing so great to me is they kind of got premium position, high value player, top 3 free safety in the league. And, it's not that I wouldn't say safety's shallow because it's not, but there's not a lot of top safeties. It's Hamilton, Dax Hill, and then you kind of get more boxy guys like Brisker, a lot of interesting guys like Nick Cross and, even Reed Blankenship's a guy I really like.
Petrie's interesting as well, but he's another one of these Brandon Stevens types. If they're like, hey, we have Stevens, he does all these things. And sometimes like you make moves to unlock other players on the roster too. So if I'm looking at this and I'm saying we got to get the most out of Brandon Stevens, he's a hell of a talent and he can play in this Dax Hill role. And Mike McDonald, obviously coached Dax Hill. it makes sense that they get the center fielder free safety and just like unleash Stevens as a matchup player.
Exactly.
But I agree with you with the market. And AJ Boye is another guy I wrote down. And all of a sudden, if you can grab, the reason I like, if you were to re-sign Double A, a couple things they could pitch to him, come back for a year. We know Marcus Peters is, you don't want to necessarily run Marcus Peters ragged coming off an ACL. We can manage the snaps. You'll play in the rotation, which they like to do. They do like a lot with their rotations. And pitch him on one more year, and then you go back out in the market, right? You prove yourself, and then you have a chance to make that money. So it could really work out for both sides. And if they could still bring back Chris Westry, maybe I'm getting greedy, but corner is the same as offensive line for them.
Yeah.
So
contingency plan.
Exactly. Yeah, and that also would really make me feel good about corner. We know, James Ogden, our guy, is a huge Derek Stingley guy, and there's a lot of good corners in this draft, and I would love them. But if you're going this route, then I would probably target D-line edge up front, top 14 pick, best player available, and feel good about it.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that could work out really well for the Ravens, don't discount a Bradley Bozeman return. I think he didn't get quite the center market he was expecting. JC Tretter's out there. So number one for me on this path forward would be a center. I think, our buddy Matt Weiss at the Matt Weiss on Twitter, kind of nailed it last night. I think they're probably feeling okay now that they have Moses because, the plan right now would be to let Cologne compete with Macari. And I think in terms of a lower, we'll call it worst case scenario, that's not that bad of a scenario. It's not my preferred option, but it's, I think you'll feel okay about that going into the year. There's some centers in this draft class that are really interesting, but the thought of JC Tretter out there, and then Lamar gets up to that line of scrimmage and he says, Tretter, Zietler, Moses. I'm feeling pretty good about that whole center to right side of the line, and it fits really well. Daniel Jeremiah put this out after the Super Bowl. If you look at the breakdown of the allocation or how the player was acquired on the last 3 Super Bowl winning teams, so that's 15 offensive linemen on 3 teams, 10 of them, if I have it right, were free agents. And so that would mean your center, right guard, right tackle. Then your left tackle is obviously hopefully a day 1 pick, and it's Ronnie Stanley out there. And your left guard is a day 2 pick, which is very much in line with kind of the Super Bowl winning offensive lines. That's kind of been my focus. It's really where I shifted with the offensive line to focusing on vets, because you just get guys that are ready to go day 1. There's always going to be that learning curve for rookies. Except for the top guys. You saw it last year. You saw Sam Cosmi in Washington start out slow and really settle in as the year went on. Even Penei Sewell, as a top drafted guy, started out slow and settled in. Rashawn Slater and Creed Humphrey were obviously a bit of a different breed, but I think that makes that upside just like your pass protection from center to right tackle is fixed with that lineup.
Yeah. Absolutely. The thing, if you were to manipulate the dollars and you're saying, all right, well, I know I've been on the Zadarius Smith train the whole time, but I'm willing to say, if you don't want to spend that money because you're rationalizing it by saying you're going to have a strong edge class, then all of a sudden I would be cool with paying Tretter and just shoring that up completely. Tretter, Moses, and Zeitler, like you said, that right side is fantastic, and then it only helps whoever's playing next to him, whether it's Ben Cleveland, Phillips, like those guys will play well. Everything just kind of, it's a domino.
Falls into place, man.
Yeah.
It's just you created that kind of vet leadership. Zietler played beside. I keep switching between Zietler and Zeitler. I don't know which one it is. I'm sure someone out there is going, "You're saying it wrong."
I think it's Zeitler, but
I think it's Zeitler. Maybe I don't know. I'll probably say.
I don't pronounce names ways. Well.
Yeah. So yeah. So I think creating contingency plans, creating veteran leadership, it's only going to help the rest of that offensive line. And then the last piece, I think, is the D line. And so there's a couple people out there. Mark here mentions love leaving D line is the biggest need in a draft class full of D line talent. my question, and we'll do this. You guys, if you guys are out there on YouTube, drop comments down below. If you guys have questions, we'll hit on them at the end. There's a few I have saved, so if you've already asked, I got it marked here. But the last question I'd ask you is, when you look at the strength of this edge class and the relative weakness of the interior defensive line pass rushing class, would you prefer, and we'll just kind of go one to another, a Justin Houston or a Calais Campbell in terms of another free agent that they could get? And I mean, we'll throw Zadarius Smith in there because I think he'll get a multi-year deal, and that cap hit will come down to around that $6 to $7 million range. So would you prefer to go with an edge rusher or a Calais Campbell in terms of another addition to this defensive line before we get into the draft?
Yes, I think I would prefer that. I think also when you look at Calais Campbell and the impact, I think he's still the better player. If you were just to like be straight up, I mean, he's the better player than between the two. Houston was really good last year though, and I think highly underrated in terms of his overall value compared to the rest of the players that are out there in the market. But I just like Calais Campbell's value a little bit more because what he does, you can't find that. Like you said, there is lack of, I mean, there's lack of interior line proven quality players. There's some nice talent. There's some nice players that could give you that. I mean, there's some scenarios. I got asked this earlier, or I think it was yesterday. Is Jordan Davis now firmly in play? If you were to sign Zadarius Smith or some edge player, and kind of, yeah, but we've talked about this. Like, do you know that Jordan Davis is even going to play full-time snaps, or does he? He might not have to here, right? But what's the value that he brings? Is he going to bring that pass rush value? And I'm a little bit worried about that part. I'm not going to lie. I think it hurt them against the better quarterbacks like the Bengals or Burrow and the Bengals, or whenever they've had the 4-man front. I brought this up in the Steelers in the second game against Pittsburgh, I think it was. They forced those guys to stay on the field, those big guys. They were in their base. The Steelers spread them out, and they couldn't rush the passer. So I would hate to be in that situation again. But I understand now with the market. I mean, if you can get a guy like Matt Ioannidis, I'm kind of torn. I mean, I want Campbell back because he's familiarity, and just I think he's a good ball player that's really been very good for them. But yeah, I'm kind of more in that camp and starting to side to the draft class on the edge side. I'm getting around to that.
Yeah, and I feel like someone's going to be there at 14. It's either going to be a corner or an edge. That's really what I see.
Yeah, I agree. But it's hard for me to give up on Zadarius Smith just because.
Well, he can slide inside, right? So even if you got, like we talked about this yesterday, I think you and I were on the same thread. Like if they got Zadarius and Jermaine Johnson, your fourth down hunting line is Jermaine Johnson, Zadarius Smith, Justin Matabike, and Odafe Owe. And that's not bad.
No, it would
that line can hunt.
Transform their defense, and then you have Williams at safety. All of a sudden, you get your.
It gets exciting real quick.
That's got me. I've got goosebumps. I'm thinking 2018 all over again. But with
I
better
think that's
pass
why
rush.
I prefer Zaw Smith over Justin Houston because, I think Zaw Smith brings longer term injury concern because he's coming off a back injury. I think they'd have to give him a multi-year deal. They'll do their due diligence and whatnot, but that gives you a little bit of anxiousness. But Justin Houston just won't move inside the way Zaw can. So it kind of changes the way, even if you get into nickel situations and you have Tybo as one of your nickel linebackers beside a queen or a coverage linebacker that they draft. I mean, you can get really creative with 5-man pressures, 5-man simulated pressures, with Bowser dropping. So I think it even gives you that opportunity to get 5 pass rushers on the field in your nickel. So I think it just creates flexibility for Mike McDonald. I joked around last night. I said, you go look at what he did at Michigan. He'll get 5 pass rushers and 5 safeties on the field at the same time. He doesn't care. Like he was that creative. So
yeah, he really does. He's got that Bill Belichick mentality. He's just going to play whatever defense he needs to play for that opponent. I'm with you. I think those are some. I like Zadarius Smith the most if I had my choice, but the money's going to be tough. So I'm willing to concede and go these other routes.
Love it. And we'll get into the questions here. So, again, if you guys have questions, we'll go through them and then we'll wrap up here. So first one, are we moving up for Falale? Give him a solid year to develop. I still would. It would be a really great situation for Falale to come in where he's surrounded by so many veterans. He's someone that I think he can start right away for you, especially at right tackle. So that's where the fit kind of struggles with me because I think Morgan Moses is your plug and play right tackle. But if they see Falale the way I do and see that left tackle ability, I think that's where the situation becomes intriguing. And the question is, can he start day one at left tackle? Is how risky is that? Where's Stanley's health at? All of that kind of plays into a factor here. What do you think about that? What do you think about Falale as a second round pick?
I love it. I think he got so many good qualities. Again, we talked about these. The Ravens have a type at tackles. We know that he fits
Monsters.
all of it. Yeah, monsters, big dudes. But he was like more athletic than I thought. Just looking at some of the Senior Bowl reps, like he can move. His footwork's really, really good. I wouldn't be surprised if he did have the ability to even play left tackle, like kind of like Orlando Brown Jr., where he could go both ways. But the talent and the size, yeah, you got to get a guy like that if he's there. I'd be all about that.
Agreed. Given the FA signings, any indication the team will lean DND tackle with pick 14, many to choose from, in my opinion. Gardner, Stingley, Cross would be a steal. I definitely agree about those guys being steals, and I think it's kind of fun if you sit down right now and you write out the 3 offensive tackles, and then you write out your top 11 favorite defenders. You got a pretty damn good list there, and one of them is going to be there at 14. That's just basic math. I do know that part of math. So I think that's where this becomes an interesting question. And we talked about Jordan Davis a little bit, but there's also Devontae Wyatt out there that kind of factors into that conversation of 14. And it's like, are they going to be, how much do you stick to BPA versus defensive line falling off quicker? Maybe you go for one there and you get a Wyatt, and you got Wyatt Matabike on the inside. So, what do you think about that? Do you think Wyatt's worth 14? Do you think Davis is worth 14? What do you think?
Yes. Oh, I think, yeah, no, I think what you're saying in terms of like, now do you recalibrate the way you assess this based on, we're just going to attack the position altogether, because we've seen in the draft teams make those runs. They don't care really. They'll just attack the need in the position. I like Wyatt a lot. His talent, I would not be opposed to that at 14. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think that would make a ton of sense just if they want to. And the other thing is McDonald, right? It comes back to him. Like, I know they signed Marcus Williams, so on paper that looks like they're going to do the same things that they did before. They're going to rely on their corners. They have this free safety who can play in cover one and split safety and all that stuff. But is McDonald saying, I need guys up front, 4 or 5 man rushes where I can get interior pressure? That would change, I think, the scope of how they look at that, where they probably would need to, again, if you're not bringing Campbell back, you got to fill that void. So Wyatt is very enticing given that, and he's a better pass rusher than Davis. You know what you're getting with him. He's got that ability immediately.
Absolutely. And, would it be worth bringing Campbell back and playing him as more of a 0-1 tech, drafting, acquiring a 3 tech? I think they've done a little bit of that in pass rushing situations where they're lining him up over the guard in the center and in that A gap. But I think they'll still probably lean towards a more traditional 1 or 0 tech, whether that's an Eddie Goldman, Michael Pierce, or a drafted guy like a John Ridgway, Noah Ellis out of Idaho. I think they'll probably lean that way. At the 0 tech, it just seems to be, there's always kind of what my opinion is and what I see them do historically. And they've just always had that guy. They've always had a 0 tech on the team, it seems.
Yeah, and it's also, there's a physicality involved. It takes those guys get beat up, the pounding, right? You don't want Campbell to absorb that consistently. You change things up, like you said, and you play him definitely in 3rd down rush situations. You play him over the center. You can play Zadarius Smith over the center, like we talked about. So then you can get creative, and that's the selling point for Calais, is that if you do what you said, you have Bowser on the field and you have, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 guys that are edge type players. You can play Campbell as your nose, and that's a really good thing for him, and gives him the chance to have some better matchups and win those matchups up front.
Absolutely, well said. And I think that about covers everything I was hoping to pick your brain on. So, Dev, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, especially in the middle of the day. I don't know if you're skipping out on work like I am, but it was a lot of fun to chop this up with you. So, kind of give us, are you excited moving forward? How do you feel overall about the start of free agency before we log off here?
Well, regarding the work point, let's just say I figured out a way to carve out some time. Cole, you know this well because we talk all the time. My schedule's chaotic, so I am glad I was able to do this with you and figure it out. I'm ecstatic, and Marcus Williams was a pipe dream to me, and the fact that they were able to get him, I just can't believe it. Still, I mean, 25 years old, top of the market, free safety. There's only so many of those available. Like you said, it's like a unicorn kind of to find that. So even just getting him, and then Morgan Moses is cherry on the top. And they have a lot of resources. I've said this over and over again to the fan base. Top 14 pick each round, multiple middle round picks, cap flexibility. You add that up. Eric DeCosta is not playing. Like, he's finally got a lot of things to work with. And I think, being in that position, he's got a lot of levers he can pull, whether it's trades. He still has picks he can make, picks he can use to trade.
Exactly.
So, and the Ravens are playing this really well in the sense that they have enough cap to be in a position where, with a veteran free agent market, they're going to be one of the few games in town. So I'm pumped. I think they're going to be a much better team come draft time, and that's saying a lot because they weren't that far off anyway. They just needed to get back some guys from last year from injuries.
Yeah, no, well said. And if they can finish this week with the signing of a JC Treader or Bradley Bozeman, I think I'll just fall out of my chair with happiness. So, I mean, they've already exceeded my expectations, and anything more is just gravy at this point. But that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Dev for joining us. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other.